The Game Week 33 deadline is here, so it's time to make some final decisions. Welcome to FPL, mate. My name is Dan, and we've got some last-minute injury news and many more things to discuss today that may impact your strategy ahead of the new game week. Let's get going. So as always, guys, what we're trying to do today is make sure you have all of the information you need to make those final decisions ahead of the Game Week 33 deadline. Of course, if we don't cover anything today, feel free to leave a comment with any questions you have, but hopefully we've got most of the most important stuff covered. So this is what's coming up in today's video. First of all, we're going to check out the team and injury news from all of the Premier League teams, particularly where it is relevant to our FPL teams. After that, we are going to be predicting the minutes of all of the double Game Week teams. Arsenal, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace and Man City. We're going to go through all of the players, all of the key FPL assets and try to figure out which players are likely to start each of the games, how many minutes we're expecting them to play, and therefore which ones are going to be the best picks for you and which ones may carry a little bit more risk. So that should be pretty good. We're then going to have a look at the bench boost, make some tips for you guys and hopefully be able to convey who is a good player to bench boost? Is it worth transferring in certain players? So we'll have that covered for those last minute bench boost decisions. And then we'll have a look at a wildcard team for those free hitting in Game Week 34, but also a wildcard draft for those without a free hit as well. Finally, we're going to have a look at some projections from the market data for this week to see what's up there. So let's kick off with the team and injury news. And we're going to start off with Man City because we have received the news from Pep Guardiola that Ederson will miss the first game of Game Week 33. The game against Everton, Ederson is not going to be available for that game. It's unsure how long he is going to be out for, however, so he might not even be back for the second game in Game Week 33. So a big warning to Ederson owners, it might be worth selling him. If you are thinking about bench boosting with Ederson on your bench, you may have to sell him there as well. But however, Foden and Akanji, they have both trained, so they do have a chance of minutes over the double, which could be interesting for the minutes of other midfielders. In the case of Foden, does that reduce De Bruyne and Savinho's minutes potential? Maybe. And Akanji could actually be good for the likes of Gvardiol. Akanji playing centre-back could move Gvardiol over to the left-back position where he will have improved chances of getting attacking returns. Haaland has been spotted jogging this week as well, but he's not in main training yet. In fact, nowhere near. He's not going to be ready to start anytime soon. As for Arsenal, Arteta confirmed that Jorginho is still unavailable with no timeline on him, but Calafiori is making good progress and could feature at some point during Game Week 33. Although a start against Ipswich in the first game is so unlikely, it's not going to happen. So yes, Jorginho being unavailable maybe boosts the minutes of some of those midfield players for Arsenal. Merino, Rice, Ødegaard potentially there could mean that the likes of Merino drops into midfield potentially, or maybe increases the chance of that happening. And Calafiori, does he damage the potential of Kivior? Not necessarily this week, but maybe going into future game weeks, maybe Calafiori could start eating into Kivior's minutes just a little bit. For Newcastle, they actually hinted at an unchanged lineup for this game week, which means Gordon is once again unlikely to start, but the in-form Harvey Barnes maybe is likely to start. And as for Liverpool, Trent Alexander-Arnold is back in training and still has a chance to be on the bench in Game Week 33, but a start is very unlikely for him. So Connor Bradley owners, it looks like he's going to be good for Game Week 33, but be warned, it could be that Alexander-Arnold is the starting right back again before too long. Gomez is still out, however, which does boost the minutes potential of the likes of Bradley, but a quick warning on Kwanzaa. He is available, so he could maybe eat into some of those right back minutes for Bradley, who still doesn't seem to be able to play 90 minutes in a game. So just a little warning on there. I still think Bradley is good for Game Week 33 at least though. In terms of those other little bits of injury news, Wan-Bissaka is expected to be available this game week. So if you're bench boosting the likes of Wan-Bissaka against Southampton, I think that's pretty positive news there. Cliver is expected to be in the squad, but not necessarily starting. A long-awaited return for him. Mitoma is available. He's recovered from an injury. And Aina has still not trained if you still have the Nottingham Forest defender in your squad. So this part of the video was a bit of a challenge, so I guess take this with a little bit of a pinch of salt. But what I've tried to do today is predict the likeliness of each player starting, not just for the first game, but for the second game in the double game week for these double game week teams. We're going to be starting off with Arsenal and going through alphabetically. But first of all, I do just need to say that depending on what happens in the first game, that is obviously going to have a knock-on effect on the likeliness of players playing in the second game in the double game week. For Arsenal, I think after that Real Madrid game, a lot of the players who are regular starters maybe have reduced minutes potential for the first game in game week 33, but for the second game week in game week 33, there's not going to be another fixture for Arsenal all the way until the Champions League semi-finals against PSG for another 6 days. So we should see a stronger team for Arsenal in the second game compared to the first game, where there is maybe a bit more risk around many of the players. But let's go through this anyway, and remember, this is just predictions. We're trying to get a rough idea here, and we've got the number one player most likely to get minutes is obviously going to be the goalkeeper, David Raya. 99% chance of a start in each of these games. I'll never say 100% because there's no such thing as a 100% chance. You never know what's going to happen in football, which means that he has a total predicted starts of 1.98. And I know a few of you nerds in the comment section are already typing out, how can a player have 1.98 actual starts in a game of football in a double game week? They either start 0 games, 1 game, or both games. Totally understand that, guys. But what I tried to do here is give a kind of, I guess, an indication of what on average is the expected average result of what we might expect to happen. So in Raya's case, very, very likely he gets 2 starts and is projected maybe just under that, because you can never be 100% certain about anything in football. Saliba is the second most nailed on player, 95% chance in each of these games, which means he looks really, really good for 2 starts, 1.9 projected starts there. After that, we see the likes of Ødegaard, Rice and Marino, who could see a rotation, each of them, in game week in the first game of the game week. However, in the second game, I expect all of these to start, up to 95% for those. Kivior may be the reverse of that, actually. I think he will start in the first game because there's not really any other options. But when we get to the second game, White will have built up his fitness a little bit more. Same with Jurriën Timber, perhaps. And Calafiori has a chance to get some minutes in the second game as well, which does damage Kivior's potential in the second game, but looks very, very good for a start in the Ipswich game at least. Timber is a bit of a questionable one. He is likely to start in both of these games, but it's certainly not guaranteed. So I think you definitely can take a chance on him, but for the longer term, he's certainly a better option than Kivior. Saka is next. Probably 50-50 to start the first game and 75% sure to start the second game. Of course, if he starts the first game, that will reduce his potential in the second game, which is why he's only down at 75%. If he doesn't start in the first game, I would actually say his chances of starting in the second game probably go up to like 95%, like some of the other midfielders you see in this list. And that gives me a predicted total of 1.25. So I am predicting that Saka is more likely to play 2 games than to play 0 games, or start these games at least. And we know Saka, even if he is benched, is going to get significant minutes from the bench because he does need to build up his minutes, build up his fitness for the Champions League game the following week. So Ipswich and Crystal Palace, the fixtures. If you're thinking about captaining Saka, I think there is a very good chance he does get 2 starts in the double game week, but it's perhaps more likely that he only gets 1 start. But still, there is a good chance of him getting 2 starts here regardless. Trossard, reverse of Saka. More likely to start the first game, having not started in the Champions League, but in the second game, it's a little bit more risky. Martinelli, again, the reverse of that, similar to Saka, probably gets a rest well, not probably, but maybe 50-50 gets a rest in the first game, but more likely to start the second game to build momentum into the PSG game. Noneri's minutes not looking particularly good over the double, but the first game is more likely than the second game. Ben White, unlikely for the first game, but could come into the second game. And Calafiori, pretty much written off for the first game. And the second game, he does have a small chance of getting some minutes, but his total projections there are pretty low. Nwaneri, White, and Calafiori, I don't think I'll be looking to pick up ahead of this game week. So let's move on to Aston Villa next. And I know we didn't cover any Aston Villa injury news, and the reason for that is that there isn't any. Aston Villa with a clean bill of health going into game week 33, which probably makes rotation and predicting minutes even more difficult. And you can see on this graphic, it's a little more messy than the Arsenal one, as the minutes projections for each of these players is naturally going to be a bit lower, particularly as obviously Aston Villa have just played a Champions League game, but then also have an FA Cup game directly after, just a couple of days after the second game in game week 33. The issue is here that Aston Villa probably are going to prioritize the Premier League, and their depth of squad probably means that they can manage in the FA Cup even without some of their star players if they feel that they have had too many minutes. So I'm thinking a reasonably strong lineup for each of these games. Martinez should start both. Rodgers, I think he is going to start both games, but I guess the second game is more likely than the first. The inverse is true for Konsa. So I think he's more likely to start the first game than the second game here, but again, should start both. Tielemans is another player who we expect to start both. Pretty high projections here, but it's not guaranteed, certainly for the first game, as he has played quite a lot of games in a row here. But what we do know about the likes of Rodgers and Tielemans is that they are so crucial to the way that Aston Villa play. They are more than likely to just play every game, which is why all of these players I've just mentioned have a 1.7 or more predicted starts. So that means they're more likely to start both games than just one game. So after that, we have Marcus Rashford. I've put him down as 75% to start in each of these weeks. I think really Rashford is starting so many games recently, 5 out of 6. He is so crucial to the way that Villa are playing. And by the way, 5 out of 6 is in all competitions, by the way, guys. I might even be 6 out of 7 now, but anyway, guys, I think he has really, really good minutes potential, actually better than the likes of Watkins at this moment, because he is playing so well. And these two games are so important for Champions League qualifications in the new season. After that, Cash, less likely to start in the first game, but I think he should be good for the second game. Mings, inverse is true. Watkins really struggling to really decide whether he will start or not in either of these games. So I've put him down as 50-50 in both of the games, which does give him a total predicted start of 1. Remember, guys, though, that these players can score off the bench. We saw Watkins score off the bench in game week 32, for example. So just because a player isn't starting doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad pick, especially if they're an attacking player where you have more kind of points potential from the bench compared to a defensive player off the bench. Digne is here, unlikely to start the first game, but maybe more likely in the second game. Asensio, another one of those 50-50 guys. Maatsen is kind of the reverse of Digne. One will likely play one game and the other will play the other game. Pau Torres doesn't look particularly good for the first game, but in the second game, I think he has a better chance. And Marlon, just not really been starting recently, not really seen as a crucial player to the starts for Aston Villa. I give him a 50% chance of starting the first game, but he should still produce from the bench if he is subbed on at any time. So there you go. That's Aston Villa. Let me know what you think about that one, particularly Villa fans, because obviously it's easier for me to do an Arsenal one as an Arsenal fan. For the Villa one, it is really, really tricky at the moment, but I tried to do my best here, and hopefully you can get a rough idea just to see kind of which players are more likely to start than others. And just a quick break here, guys, to tell you to please join my Predictor League. It's completely free, and we run competitions every single month where you guys can win prizes. The link is at the top of the description, and all you need to do is predict Premier League results each game week. Who do you think will win, lose, and draw? It takes like 30 seconds to make your predictions, completely free, and you get to join our fun community of predictors or in the FPL community, and maybe have a nice chance of winning some prizes as well. Get involved, link at the top of the description. And now we move on to Crystal Palace. And by the way, guys, if you are enjoying this video, you like the changes to the final decisions videos that we are making every week to try and make it as good as possible, as useful as possible, make sure you do drop a like and feel free to subscribe if you want to see this every Friday for the rest of the season. And with Crystal Palace, because their squad is a little bit thinner than the likes of Arsenal and Aston Villa, rotation is less likely. Though it has to be said that Crystal Palace are another team who are playing a lot of games right now. So I think certainly the more defensive players, Henderson, Gay, Lacroix and Richards, pretty likely to start both games in the double game week. But then we get to the second part here. Are the likes of Munoz, Eze, Sarr, and Mateta, are they potentially rested in the second game ahead of the crucial FA Cup semi-final? With Crystal Palace no European football to fight for in the Premier League, is the FA Cup going to be the priority in trying to make it to that final? It's a huge game for Crystal Palace compared to Aston Villa's situation. It's more important to Crystal Palace. So therefore, I see Crystal Palace as a team that could very well rotate, even with their thinner squad, ahead of the second game against Arsenal, which they may see as a bit of a dead rubber, a bit of a waste of time ahead of a far more important game at the weekend. And a lot of these players have been playing so many minutes recently that really there's a good opportunity here to rest them. So we have got the likes of Mateta here, who I do want to talk about specifically, because it was mentioned in the Crystal Palace press conference today that he is set to start this game week. He is going to be back in the starting 11. That is what Glasner has said. Of course, you're never 100% because last-minute injuries and things like that will inevitably happen in the game of football. But certainly the first game, he looks pretty good for a start. Looks super likely for a start. It's just that second game I'd be a little bit more worried about, with the likes of Eddie Nketiah maybe getting some minutes against his old team Arsenal, maybe with a bit of a point to prove. Mitchell, I think, with some early substitutions recently, implies that maybe he is slightly more risky than some of the other, I guess, Crystal Palace defenders. We spoke about Nketiah maybe getting a bit more game time in the second game, so I've put in 50% in that one. And we've got Chilwell here as well as a potential starter in each of Game Week 33's fixtures. Essa maybe can get some game time. He's probably earned it. Came off the bench last week. Maybe he can get a start, but again, pretty unlikely. And Nathaniel Klein potentially could get some minutes, but it doesn't look super likely, to be totally honest. Maybe he plays the second game instead of Munoz, but I still think at 75%, Munoz is more likely to start the game than not. So those are your Crystal Palace projections, which brings us to Man City ahead of their Everton and Aston Villa double. And we've got a few players right at the top of this list. For once, it's not a goalkeeper at the top of this list. No, Gvardiol, Marmoush and Ruben Dias, I think, are pretty good for 2 starts in the double game week. I wonder if I'm maybe overestimating Marmoush potentially here because of that FA Cup game at the weekend. But Marmoush, as Man City's only natural central forward, I guess, he is going to be really good for minutes. And Gvardiol is capable of playing multiple positions. Ruben Dias is really important for the control of games at the moment as well. So he is really likely to start. So each of these 3 players, I'm put at 1.9 predicted starts here. Or we've got Ortega here next. 99% chance of a start, I guess, in the first game because Edison has been ruled out definitively. However, in the second game, I don't know if Edison is going to be available or not. I can't get that information. Even Pep Guardiola doesn't seem to know whether Edison is going to be available for game 2. I think it's unlikely, and I think it's more likely Ortega plays both of these games, but you can never be 100% sure. De Bruyne, think he will start the first game with the second game a few days before the FA Cup. It could be that De Bruyne is prioritised for the FA Cup game. Maybe there. We'll see what happens. I think De Bruyne, similar to Saka, is not able to play a huge, crazy amount of minutes right now. So, small concern there. But again, we are projecting at least 1 start for him here. Savinho is next. Similar situation. He has returned from injury as of last week. Looked good when coming off the bench, or at least looked up for it, which is a good sign. I think he should be able to get a game against Everton, but against Aston Villa, I'm not as convinced. Kovacic, I think more likely to start the second game than the first game. Rico Lewis has just been a 50-50 kind of guy all season. You never know when he's going to start or not. It's always a coin toss. Kusanov, not feeling particularly confident. I would have said that he's more likely to start the second game. But now that Akanji has been training, I do wonder if that damages Kusanov just a little bit more. So he's 50-50 on each game as well. Foden, unlikely to start the first game, but could come into the second game. Bernardo, probably more likely to start against Everton. position than Aston Villa, giving the way Man City are likely to set up tactically. And Doku, less likely in the first game, but maybe a little bit more likely in the second game, but not great projections here. Edison, I've given him 0% for the first game. I guess technically we could put him as 1%. There's some kind of miracle that makes him available, but considering he has been definitively ruled out, I'm going to have to put him at 0%, and just a 25% chance of starting in the second game. So bad news, Edison owners, it's not looking too good ahead of the double game week for him. So I was trying to think this morning, how am I going to kind of, I guess, display the bench boost, trying to visualize the bench boost and help you guys kind of figure out, is your bench looking good for a bench boost or not? And this is what I kind of came up with. So you can have two types of players on your bench. Once you've organized your team, so you have the best starting 11 on the pitch, you're going to have probably one attacker on the bench and 3 defensive players. So 1 forward or midfielder and 3 defenders or goalkeepers on your bench. You're certainly going to have 1 goalkeeper at least there. So from here, we can kind of have a look at which teams have good fixtures, which teams, providing the player is a regular starter and a decent pick generally, which teams have the best fixtures that maybe you would be less comfortable benching these kind of players and maybe could provide something good on a bench boost. So first of all, we've got these double game week teams: Arsenal, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace and Man City. If any of these players have found their way onto your bench this week after setting up your perfect 11, then you're probably going to want to bench boost that player individually. But what about the rest of the teams? Well, if you've got Liverpool players against Leicester or West Ham players against Southampton, again, these are players that are really nice to bench boost. If you've got Areola, Wan-Bissaka, Connor Bradley, Konate, and they find their way onto your bench this week, then a good idea to bench boost these guys. After that, we have a few teams that I like the attackers, but maybe not as convinced by the defenders. Bournemouth, Brentford, Newcastle and Forest. If you have attackers from these players, I think the fixtures are good enough that you can play them as part of your bench boost if they are on your bench. If you have defenders from your team, from these teams, you maybe could do, but it's like non-essential. After that, Brighton, Chelsea, Man United and Wolves. Not super convinced by their attackers or defenders, but maybe you could bench boost with a few of these guys on your bench. For Fulham and Spurs, I would bench boost the attackers, but maybe not the defenders. And for the rest of the teams, Everton, Ipswich, Leicester and Southampton, these players from these teams are not bench boostable. They are not looking good for this week, and you can barely expect any points from them, really. So, generally, what I want you guys to do is do a little experiment with me. Have a look at your team. Set up your best 11 with your worst 4 players on your bench. Then what I want you to do is look through those bench boost players, I guess, those bench players, and see how many yeses do you have. Do you have a West Ham goalkeeper? So you get 1 yes there. Do you have a Ipswich defender? That means you get a no. So in those 4 positions, how many yeses, how many maybes, and how many no's? And if you find that you have more yeses and maybes, so more players from the left-hand side of this this graphic, I suppose, then that's probably a good indication that it's a good week to bench boost. But if you have a lot of players on the right side of this graphic, then maybe that does indicate that maybe it's not the best bench boost week for you guys. So I guess as a general thing to try and, I don't know, help all of you guys out at once without looking at all of your benches individually, I think this kind of works as a bit of a tool, a bit of a reference for you guys to figure out whether your bench looks good enough to boost or not. Of course, guys, if you do want to let me know what your bench looks like for Game Week 33 in the comments section, I would be more than happy to kind of give my opinion on whether I think it is ready for a bench boost or not. One more thing, I would definitely consider making transfers to improve your bench for a bench boost, but if you are taking hits, I would be a little bit more cautious. I definitely wouldn't be taking hits for defensive players on the bench boost. I just don't think it's going to be worth it. Defenders, low ceiling kind of players, it's unlikely that you will make that back. So generally, probably a bad idea to take hits for defenders on your bench boost. But for free transfers, to try and get more players from that left-hand side, I think it is definitely a possibility. But again, you know, if you've got Newcastle players, for example, maybe you've got Newcastle defenders, I think it's fine to have one. They're going to be in the maybe column. Livramento, Burn, if you've got one of those guys, it's fine. As long as the majority of the other players are kind of yeses, then I think that is going to be fine. So, you know, if you've got Isak and Livramento, Areola, and maybe one more defender, Konsa, that means you've got 3 yeses and 1 maybe. That's a good bench boost. If you've got 2 yeses, 2 maybes, again, it's probably a good bench boost. But if you've got no yeses, 3 maybes, and a no, this probably means it's no bench boost for you. So yeah, let me know, guys, in the chat where you guys are at with your bench boost this week. So I'm going to run through these quickly, but I know a few people have requested a Game Week 33 wildcard for this week, just a wildcard draft. So I've put one on screen for you guys here. I'll run through it quickly, and it's going to be Raya, Areola, Saliba, Konsa, Gvardiol, Williams, Mikalenko, Saka, Salah, Rashford, Rodgers, Bowen, Mateta, Wood, and Marmoush. And there are some other options on screen for you guys as well. Now, this wildcard team does assume you will be free hitting in Game Week 34. So it's not set up for a bench boost because it is a wildcard team. But I'm imagining that a lot of you guys have teams pretty similar to this already. Fingers crossed you do. And if you do have a free hit, you can definitely consider wildcarding this week if you want to. And if your team is, I don't know, I guess you feel it's not very well set up for the double. You don't have the Arsenal, the Man City, the Aston Villa players for the double. So one more note on this, guys. So I'm just going to throw this on screen actually for you guys. Remember that we still do have a pretty good chance of a double game week in 36 with teams like Man City, Aston Villa, and some other teams here you can see on screen. Bournemouth, for example, even Spurs, all have a chance of a double in 36. So if you are wildcarding, it might be still a good idea to go for the likes of, Aston Villa, Man City, Aston Villa and Crystal Palace, I guess. Even though you might not love their double game weeks, you're not just getting them for Game Week 33, you're also getting them for a potential double Game Week 36 as well. So you could get, 2 double game weeks out of a lot of these players. So that is just a reason why we do see so many double game week players in these kind of wildcard teams and, in transfer tips generally, despite the fact that you may not love the look of their double game weeks. And here we have a wildcard team with no free hit. So I would definitely say that if possible, if you don't have a free hit, I would try and save your wildcard to Game Week 34. I think that might be the best option for a lot of people. But if your team just looks rubbish for Game Week 33 and rubbish for Game Week 34, but you still have a wildcard in hand, I guess maybe you could play it this week after all. And this is what the team would look like. So remember, we're going to have to include some players with potential double game weeks later. But what we've got here is players from the likes of Wolves, for example, maybe some Nottingham Forest in there, maybe some West Ham, who have a chance of a double game week later in the season and have a fixture in Game Week 34. Because if you're wildcarding now with no free hit, not only do you have to cover doubles in 33, but also the blanks in Game Week 34. Now, of course, you could go for more double game week players in your wildcard if you have some banked transfers, or if you're willing to use transfers, take hits in Game Week 34 to remove double game week players from 33 and replace them with playing players in Game Week 34. Because remember, they're the same guys. So let's go through this team anyway. Raya, Jose Sa, Konate, Kilman, Gvardiol, Nico Williams, Mikalenko, Saka, Salah, Murphy, Mbermo, Bowen, Cunha, Isak, and Marmoush. There you go. There is a Game Week 33 wildcard for those without a free hit. So here are the goal and clean sheet projections for the Premier League teams this week. So we can kind of get an idea of how many goals we're expecting each team to score, and of course, how many clean sheets are likely as well. This, of course, comes from Rob T FPL, and it is based on market data. So those who get paid a lot of money to make these predictions and make these projections are going to be informing us this week once again. And we do see the likes of Arsenal and Man City with by far the highest goal projections for this game week. 4.1 projected goals for Arsenal and 3.75 for Man City. So we're expecting each of these two teams to score around 4 goals over the double game week. Of course, it could be a little lower, could be a little higher. You never know in football. Aston Villa come in third here, but they are equal, pretty much equal anyway, with Liverpool, who have 2.7 projected goals, with Aston Villa just above with 2.98. After that, Crystal Palace, despite a double game week, are a little bit lower at 2.33, which is only slightly above West Ham at 2.1 against Southampton. As for the clean sheets, we see the likes of Arsenal right at the top once again, 68% chance of 1 or more clean sheet for Game Week 33, which is really, really high. This is like the highest we've seen all season. So yeah, definitely a good week for Arsenal defenders. Man City at 49% of one or more clean sheet, and Liverpool just behind that at 46%. West Ham pretty good at 40%, and after that, the double game week teams, Crystal Crystal Palace and Aston Villa are a little bit lower for clean sheet potential. But interestingly, Crystal Palace with a slightly higher chance of a clean sheet in game week 33 than Aston Villa, which you may not have expected, but I think Crystal Palace have the slightly better fixtures from a defender's point of view at least. Manchester United also would have a pretty good chance of a clean sheet here at 33%, and the rest of the teams are at 25% or below, so maybe not so good if you're looking for clean sheet points, and that includes Newcastle, who are only at 19%. I guess these numbers are still, you know, somewhat significant. You can say that if you have a Wolves or a Newcastle or Brighton defender in your team, you're still going to get like a 1 in 5 chance of a clean sheet this week, but it's not crazy high. So I wouldn't be betting on it too much. But if that's just the way your team looks like right now, then maybe you take your chances of one of these players from lower down the list. But generally, I think if you're on a bench boost in particular, you want to see your defenders and your goalkeepers in that, I want to say, top 7 really in this list. And if you've got 1 out of your 3 defensive players below the top 7, I think that's okay, as long as the other 2 are in that top 7 group of teams there. So we're looking at Liverpool, West Ham, Aston Villa defenders, most likely, who are going to be on your bench, maybe Crystal Palace for game week 33. And those are the projections. And that's going to be it for me today, guys. If you enjoyed this one, drop a like. Do subscribe if you are new around here. I really appreciate you watching. Check out another video if you want to. But until tomorrow's deadline stream, I will see you later, mates. Bye-bye.